This is Sam Black with Drafting Archetypes, and today I'm going to be discussing uh, my first impressions of Final Fantasy based on streaming the early access event yesterday. So I want to start by going over the archetypes. So first, the archetypes as described. Well, I will be for each archetype. I'll say what Wizards official information says the archetype is about and my thoughts on it. So first, blue-white is artifacts. This is pretty straightforward. There are a bunch of artifacts, and the signpost cards care about artifacts. When I drafted this deck, I had too much common equipment, not enough payoffs. My deck felt pretty weak. I'm not sure how consistently you'll get enough support for it in terms of actual payoffs rather than just artifact cards. Magitech Infantry, the 1-mana 1/1 that gets +1/+0 if you have another artifact, and you can spend 3 mana to search your library for a copy of it and put it onto the battlefield, really impressed me out of an opponent. They just curved Magitech Infantry into a 2-mana equipment into activate Magitech Infantry, and that was just 2 power into 2 power into 2 power, and it was pretty wide, and it didn't my draw, I was on the draw, my draw wasn't very fast, and I was basically dead. So that card seemed very strong, but I'm, I guess, a little skeptical. I guess my approach of just playing as many equipments as possible felt like a pretty bad way to go about it. I think you want more, the payoff stuff and a light touch of the equipment stuff. Blue-black is described as control. I always get annoyed when that's the whole theme. I personally prefer mechanical themes to the generic strategic themes. But in this case, I do think that might primarily be just a messaging issue or how they present it. It seems to me like blue-black is more of a graveyard flashback type thing, but there's not a lot of self-mail, but there's not even that little. There's surveil, there are some mill cards available. So you do want, interactive spells to have the game go long, to have time to do the flashback stuff and get a bunch of cards in your graveyard for cards that care about that. I think there's a lot of overlap in what blue black and blue red are looking for. So, they both actually the whole Grixis space, as I'm going to get into, seems very synergistic. So black red is described as black mage. So this is also a spell-based deck. There are some cards that make black wizard tokens that are 0/1s that deal damage to your opponent whenever you cast a non-creature spell. And so you play stuff that makes those, some non-creature spells, removal spells, maybe aggressive creatures because you're going to be pinging your opponent, and you just get a lot of reach out of just casting whatever. So that plays really well with flashback stuff and spell heavy stuff, and in general it feels like all of Grixis is kind of looking for the same cards, and if you can get the mana for it, then it seems pretty easy to just draft it as 3-color. Also, my first draft of the format, I drafted red-black, and I ended up doing the black mage thing without really studying the set or knowing that Black Wizards was the theme here, and it just kind of came together from the cards. So I do think that this is probably pretty well supported. Red-green is landfall aggro. We've seen this before, but I think it's really well supported, and I like the execution this time. I drafted it once. I had both of the signposts uncommons. They both seemed very good. I like this execution of red-green landfall more than I like most red-green archetypes. I'm pretty happy with it. It played pretty well. The Predator's Strike, the Blitzball something or other, +3/+3 and trample for 2 mana, was very good here. There are good aggressive creatures, but also because of the landfall stuff, it scales pretty well into the late game. The red, Call the Mountain Chocobo, 4 mana, make a 2/2, search your library for a 2/2 with landfall +1/+0, search your library for a mountain, flashback 6. uh, was pretty impressive in this and red black and red blue. Just like getting a guy, being a spell that costs 4, getting a land, making your land drops to do your flashback stuff and trigger your landfall and everything. That card isn't like blowing anyone away on rate, but has just a lot of different synergies in the different red decks. So I liked what was going on here. White black, I didn't draft. The stated theme is artifact and creature sacrifice. While I didn't draft it, I do buy this one. The fact that the sacrifice stuff in the set cares about sacrificing both creatures and artifacts makes it pretty easy to make it work because there are like a decent number of cards that make treasures, and getting paid for sacrificing those treasures is like pretty good because treasures come pretty cheap. You can also sacrifice the both the equipment and the token from the like job select equipment. I think both of the signposts here are pretty strong. So I think that black white looks legit to me, and I suspect that it, really does the artifact and creature sacrifice thing. There's a black common 2/2 flying death touch that you can spend 3 mana and sacrifice a creature or artifact to draw a card. I think that card is generically pretty good if you're making treasures and or 1/1s or whatever, and there are a lot of ways to do that. I think that card is, generally good and going to be exceptionally good in white black. I like what's going on here. Blue red is big non-creatures. I thought that this archetype works really surprisingly well, given that it's asking you to fill your deck with expensive cards. I think the signpost uncommons are really good. And one of the keys that makes this work is that it doesn't care about casting spells with mana value 4 or greater. It cares about spending 4 or more mana on a spell. It looks at the mana spent, not the casting cost, which means that it works with the tiered spells, which are like this set's version of like Kicker, and the flashback cards when the flashback cost is 4 or greater. So this means that like just in commons, you have Syncopate, which is a reprint, the like power sync variant that exiles, Thunder Magic, which is the tiered deal damage to a creature spell that can be 1 mana for shock a creature, 4 mana for 4 damage to a creature, or 6 mana for, I don't know, like 6 or 8 damage or something to a creature. And then Dreams of Laguna, which is the Scry 1 draw or Surveil 1 draw card flashback 4, 2 mana for the first cast. Ice Magic is the tiered bounce spell. Laughing Mad is 3 mana, draw 2, discard 1, flashback for 4 mana. So that's a bunch of different commons that you can cast for less than 4 mana and give you stuff to do and interactive stuff to do. But then when you draw it later, it's all triggering your 4+ condition. So I think this set did a really good job of supporting the like mechanic in a way that lets you build a deck that's functional and like doesn't even have that many cards that like have to cost 4 or more. And a lot of the ones that you want to play that do cost 4 or more have flashback. So for 1 slot in your deck, you're potentially getting 2 4+ triggers off of it. One when you catch it the first time and another when you flash it back. So this seemed quite well supported. And yeah, I think this is a pretty cool deck. It's, still like a blue-red spells deck, but it's a very different twist than the normal blue-red cast as many spells as you can in a turn. This is like very much the opposite. It's cast a single big thing instead of lots of little things. So I like that as just a departure from the normal design while still feeling very blue-red and working well with the specific set design, the card designs in the set. Also, the things that pay you for this, like there's a 1 in a blue 1/3 that when you do this thing gets a +1/+1 counter and becomes unblockable this turn. That card was very impressive because it is easier than it looks to have a bunch of spells that trigger it. Growing and also becoming unblockable is like a very real like source of inevitability that also like blocks reasonably early. like a 2 mana 1/3 is a reasonable blocker in a set that has a bunch of like equipment for 2 mana that like results in a 2/1 or 2/2 creature, and that thing starts growing pretty soon. That was a very impressive common from what I saw. Green black is listed as graveyard value, so very very generic green black stuff, but I'm fine with that. Just because what else are you gonna do with green black? um, and it's always fun, and I like some of the unique stuff about how it plays in this set. Um, so notably, this is a set with flashbacks. So you can play like Resentful Revelation, which is the 2 mana black spell that looks at the top 3 cards, puts 1 in your hand and 2 in your graveyard, and then flashes back for 7. So that's like both an enabler and a payoff for milling, right? Like when you cast it the first time, you end up with 3 cards in your graveyard, and then if you mill it with something else, it's a flashback spell that you can cast from your graveyard. You want to be careful leaning too hard into flashback here, because your cards are looking for permanence in your graveyard, so you do want to keep a pretty high density of permanence rather than having flashback spells in your deck. So when you're milling, it's not necessarily better to mill a flashback card than just like another permanent for your graveyard. So what you're really looking for are like Town Greeter and Shinra reinforcements. Town Greeter is the slightly improved Satyr Wayfinder. We haven't had an improved Satyr Wayfinder like ever, so that's kind of cool. It's mostly just the same card though. It just gains 2 life if you find a town. And Shinra Reinforcements, which is the 2 and a black 2/3 ETB mill 3 gain 3, which I think is pretty good rate. You can compare it to like AFR standout Vampire Spawn, where you're gaining an extra life, and instead of making your opponent lose 2 life, you're milling 3. So if you're not aggressive and you care about your graveyard, it's like a pretty solid defensive body that's, helping set up all your stuff. The land cyclers are nice here, especially if you have the uncommon Evil Reawakened, which is a 5 mana zombify that makes them come back with 2 +1/+1 counters. And I also want to shout out Elixir here. That's the 1 mana ETB tapped Elixir of Immortality, except it's 5 to activate instead of 2, and instead of gaining 5 life, you gain life equal to the number of cards it shuffles in, and it shuffles all non-lands from your graveyard into your library. So like when you mill a bunch and you have a bunch of lands and other spells in your deck, and then you activate it, you're only shuffling the spells back in, which is generally what you want to be doing. So you end up with like a super spell heavy deck. I think that this card is actually really awesome in the graveyard value decks. The fact that it exiles itself instead of shuffling it in is like a bit of a buzzkill for me in general, because I like to be like real inevitable. But the reality is, when you gain 15 life and make your deck all gas, you're probably going to be able to win the game before you would need to like do it again anyway. And I like that it lets you just go super hard on milling, and then there are a bunch of different cards that can return permanents from your graveyard to your hand, or at least multiples. And so you can, just like very safely mill a bunch, mill that, pick it up, keep milling hard, shuffle everything back in, and you're off to the races. Even though you now don't have a graveyard for your graveyard count stuff, like your deck should be so good at this point that it's like very sweet. So I like that card a lot, and I think it makes this deck like play out differently than a lot of the other like green black graveyard decks in other formats. I'm excited to do more with that. Red white is equipment aggro. I'm going to be real with you. I don't have any idea about this one. I didn't draft it. I didn't play against it a lot. There are some equipment that seem pretty good. I'm not sure how good this is going to be overall. Like, there's some support, but I just don't know how it comes together. And then green black is Town Ramp. This archetype actually looks pretty sweet to me, but I didn't get a chance to draft it. As is very often the case for green blue, this is just like a multicolor ramp deck. But I do think that the decks that are doing this should feel very much like they're doing the blue-green thing. I don't think towns in general are going to be super contested, although there might be, if I'm right about Grixis playing well as like a 3-color control deck, there might be people trying to snap up the Grixis dual lands. But think in general you'll be able to like find random towns, and there aren't a ton of cards that care about towns, but there is Travel the Outworld, which is uncommon blue 5, draw 4 sorcery that has affinity for towns. I think that there's, if you have a lot of towns, presumably other people don't have a lot of towns, so this should go pretty late. And, if it's between 2 and 4 mana to draw 4 cards, that's very powerful. And you don't need it to be cheap early. You only need it to be cheap when you're like done casting your other spells and looking to reload. I think that I think basically there are going to be like a lot of kind of like sub archetypes here based on like which colors you're splashing, based on what towns you see. There's a lot of good reason to overlap with the landfall stuff in like a Temur ramp deck, or with kind of the flashback big mana stuff in different flavor of Temur, where you're doing more of the blue-red thing instead of the red-green thing, or in a Sultai situation where you're like doing some of the self-mill and some of the flashback stuff. Now realizing that I think I accidentally skipped green-white, which is go wide, allegedly. I say allegedly because there are very few commons that actually make more than one body, and those that do exist cost 4 and 5 mana. There's the 4 mana make 3 1/1s, or tap a creature and stun it for a while, or Fat Chocobo, the 5 mana 4/4 that makes a 2/2. And that's just not like a lot of support for go wide. There also aren't cheap uncommons that go wide. And like there are ways to get, 1/1s that give you extra resources, like Town Greeter or the Job Select equipment. But I don't really see how you're really enabling go wide. Like there are payoffs for being wide, but I don't know how you get wide. I'm often asked, how fast is the format? I would say it's too soon to tell. I played some very quick games defined by aggressive draws, and some that almost came down to decking. My first impression is that a wide range of strategies are possible, but it's always easy for it to look that way on day one, and we'll see how everything shakes out. But all in all, I really like what's happening here. So those are my thoughts on the archetypes from what I've observed and what I could see of the card file, and, what they're said to do. So, all in all, it looks sweet, but we'll see. So, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is earlier this week, I announced on Twitter that I'd be leaving drafting archetypes and no longer streaming on a regular basis. And I want to take some time to give some background on that and talk about it, and talk about what's going on, I guess. I started streaming and started this podcast during the pandemic. I was living with my girlfriend at the time. We were both drafting on Arena a lot. And she encouraged me to do something more productive during the pandemic when we weren't doing a lot. And so I did this. I started streaming and started a podcast. And for me, Magic has always been a paper game whenever possible. I've talked about how I've kind of built my life around playing as much paper Magic as possible, and that's kind of what got me into Magic tournaments. It's just like I wanted to play more often than my friends wanted to play, and so tournaments were a way to find other people who played, and kind of like what the landscape was around me in terms of how to play the most Magic is kind of what's driven what I'm interested in the Magic space. And these days, I don't have friends who I talk to in person about limited Magic, and I haven't for quite some time. I'm playing a lot of paper Magic, but my local community plays CDH, and so that's where most of my focus has been and where all my like social focus in Magic has been. And that's kind of where I want my focus to be. I have maintained this stream and podcast for the last few years because people come up to me at events and tell me how helpful it's been and that they appreciate what I do. And the regular viewers on Twitch have been really positive and appreciative. And it's been clear that, you know, they like having the stream to come to and learn from. And when I'm appreciated, I really like doing the things that people appreciate. But you know, I haven't really been making any money off of the stream, basically, because I don't like asking for money or going out of my way to find ways to monetize things. And it takes a lot of time. And I've gotten to the point where I want to do other things with that time. I still want to be involved in Magic content creation. I just want to focus on, you know, focus on what I'm doing socially. I have a lot of thoughts on CDH that I haven't had a platform to share, and I want to fix that. I'm not ready to announce exactly all the details about what I'll be doing, but I've started some work on it, and I'm excited about it. I know most of the people listening to this are limited enthusiasts who are probably not excited about CDH. And to those of you who the content will be serving less well moving forward, I'm sorry about that. And I will say that it wasn't an easy decision. I really believe in what I was doing with drafting archetypes, and I think it's a really valuable resource for the community. I am looking into finding someone to pass off hosting to try to continue the podcast, who I would trust to maintain the, you know, general structure and ideally quality of the podcast moving forward. But I'm also thinking about simply pausing it for a while first to decide if I want to try to pick it up again or to rework my approach and, you know, keep doing it, but in a different way that works for me. To be clear, this is a consideration that I had literally while I was writing these notes. I realized that I was sad that I wouldn't be exploring this set more, and I started to wonder if stepping away from everything or from limited and this podcast is really the right thing for me to do. I do still think it is, but at the moment I'm feeling like I kind of want to take some time away, see what my, you know, days are like while I'm not streaming, and see how it feels and whether I want to try to step back into it. So I'm in conversations with some people about, you know, passing hosting responsibilities to someone else, considering whether I should still be involved in the podcast in some ways. There's a lot of stuff I'm not sure about. And I think that what I'm realizing today in this moment is that I think I want to give myself a little bit of time with the decision about where to go with this. But regardless of what I decide, I really appreciate the support from everyone throughout the years. You know, this podcast has been going on for almost 5 years, and it's been really fun to be able to help everyone the ways that I have with this. So that's what I have to say about this. Also, I forgot to, despite putting it in my notes, I think I forgot at the beginning of this to say that, as always, the notes are available to follow along at patreon.com/draftingarchetypes. And also, the notes for this particular episode are available for free to everyone, including all non-patrons. So if you want to, you know, see those notes or reread or share what I said at the end here, I wrote all of that out, you know, not exactly word for word, but the way that I do with my notes, where I jot down some ideas and glance at them to make sure I don't lose track of anything while I'm talking. So that's there. This is where I would normally, try to promote the podcast a little bit, ask for Patreon support. I am going to be, pausing the Patreon or not if it doesn't need. I need to look into whether I need to pause the Patreon or whether it's automatically paused if I'm not putting stuff out. I don't expect anyone to sign up for the Patreon while nothing is being created, but if a bunch of people did, I guess it would tell me that, you're here for it if I come back to it. But again, I really don't expect that and doubt it would happen. So I've finished my thoughts and my Patreon bit. So now it is time to turn it over to chat for ideally primarily questions about Final Fantasy, but maybe, general statements about the podcast or, questions about my plans. Again, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, and so I can't field, but I'm open to, whatever it seems like people need to talk about. So what do you have for me, chat? Any thoughts on Shinra reinforcements as a quality black common? Yeah, I mean, so that's I talked about that. The 3 mana 2/3 gain 3 mill 3. I think that it's like a strong card on rate. It's the kind of card I like a lot. Obviously, it's, in the like Watcher of the Wayside type space, but with kind of like better numbers for what it's doing. I think it's going to be quite good in green black and have like a reasonable place in like blue black life gain and support for some of the graveyard stuff and flashback stuff. I don't think it's generally where you're going to want to be in like black red or black white. So I don't see it as like a, top tier first pick black uncommon or black common or anything, or like something. I don't think it's going to be one of the top performing black commons, though it could. Vampire Spawn is, impressed us before. But I definitely think that, there are going to be decks that are going to want it and it's going to perform well in those decks. About Elixir, is there any way to get it back if you mill it? Yeah, I talked about that. There's like Radius Return is the all your creatures get +3/+3 for 5 mana, or return 2 permanents from your graveyards. That's like a really good way to get it back if you're milling a bunch. And then there's also the like uncommon creature that mills 2 and then returns a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. So there are uncommons that are like generally only really good in green black, shouldn't be highly contested. You should usually like see a couple of them that can let you get it back. So like mill Elixir and then get it back, I think is a very real part of what's happening in green black. I noticed some of the green white uncommons and rares give bonuses to the creature sagas. Is it realistic to get enough of these cards in a green white deck, assuming the green white lane is open? I do think that, like, because as I was saying, I think that green white is not well supported. I think that it will often be open. And yeah, I mean, like Choco Mog, the saga pumps your team, like that makes sense as part of what you're trying to do in a go wide deck. It's weird because like you're trying to like go wide, but you don't have like a card that makes a lot of bodies, or you don't have a lot of cards that make a lot of bodies, and then you're trying to play a body that doesn't stay around, which means that it's kind of like naturally becoming less wide. But like there's the uncommon that like removes counters from sagas to get bigger, that can go kind of crazy with some of the sagas. So I do think that like while the stated theme is go wide, I think that in practice, the saga is like a little bit more, or the archetype is a little bit more about sagas, probably. And yeah, I suspect that green white is like not as bad as it kind of looks when you read, oh, this is supposed to be green white or go wide, and then you like look at the set and you're like, how? Maybe you're just supposed to like get all of the like 4 mana things that make 3 guys and then just get all the payoffs. It's weird, but I have to believe there's probably, some way to draft green white, but maybe not. Regarding the podcast in general, potential for a co-host to mainly take over and do it in conjunction with you, someone who's in charge of the main responsibilities for the show. with you co-hosting to have a discussion with them and give you your takes. I will be honest, that is a specific structure that I have discussed and does appeal to me. I am trying to remove my obligations to free up time to play limited because I can't do that with other people. And when I'm playing Magic, I want to be doing it in paper with friends. But the idea of having someone who is drafting a lot, who puts together the overview the way that I've been doing, and then to record it not on stream and to have me take the place of chat and, process what they're saying and parse questions that I would have or think that, they might not have covered that, I would have covered in their shoes because, I do this maybe differently than other people would. That direction does appeal to me if I find the right host. That is a possibility that I think could be interesting. I suspect that the audience would respond well to finding a way to keep me involved, and that would let me free up the necessary amount of time for me to be comfortable with the direction of things. So, yes, I'm in discussion about potentially trying to make that happen. It's one of many possibilities, but it is something that I have in mind. Will you continue the stream throughout the Final Fantasy season? No. Today is my last scheduled regular stream. I will give myself permission to stream spontaneously if I'm feeling it and don't have other stuff to do. I have no idea if or how much I will do that. There might be some Final Fantasy limited streams. There might not be. I want to give myself some space and time to figure out what I want to do. Green Red has Radia and Terra for building around sagas too. Yes, you can do some saga stuff in Green Red. Terra is rare, of course, but Radia does, make you want some sagas in there. And, Green and Red both have common sagas, so there is like a saga sub-theme in like the Naya space that isn't like included in any of like Wizards stated archetype stuff. I found using life total as a resource versus the tail end of a saga creature happening a lot. Yeah, I meant to talk more about sagas because I do think that they're kind of like the new twist that has like the most learning curve in terms of play pattern. Like when I was playing, there were a few times where I kind of like forgot about like the fact that a saga was going to be going away, and so like I attacked a creature into a saga to trade, and it's like, well, I just threw that creature away. Like the last chapter of this saga didn't really matter, and it was going to be gone anyway. And like, questions about like, okay, my opponent has this saga, it's done its like main thing, and the rest of these chapters don't matter very much. So like, do I want to just like let this thing hit me for a while, or do I want to like trade a creature with it? I think that the sagas are often going to function just kind of like burn spells. But then there are other times where you can't find a good attack with, the sagas are terrible if you don't care about the things that they're doing for you in a board stall where they just kind of like tick down and go away. There was a question about like, do these things make the format like more aggressive or less aggressive or whatever, where it's like, well, on the one hand, you have this creature that you don't have block, so it's kind of like a burn spell. On the other hand, if your opponent's ahead because they like curved out with a saga, that creature's just going to answer itself, and that's going to make it a lot easier to stabilize. So it's complicated, and I think that what I really would say about it is pay a lot of attention in your early games against sagas to, really thinking through what happens if you, engage with it as a creature and trade off as normal or whatever, and what happens if you just kind of wait it out. And, can you afford to take the hits? Do you want to chump block instead of trading? Do you want to not attack with a big thing for a little while to preserve your life total while you have a big creature and let your opponent's little creature go away in a spot where you would normally race? So I do think that there's kind of a lot to unpack in terms of playing with sagas, and that stuff looks like pretty fun and interesting to explore early. How much of an impact did the bonus sheet have on your games? This set's one is very different considering it's only in 1/3 of each pack. Yeah, so the bonus sheet, it comes up 1/3 as much in terms of number of it's you in the past bonus sheets have been in every pack. This is in 1/3 of packs. The bonus sheet seems to have a lot of just strong, efficient, constructed power level cards like Counterspell and Fatal Push and Deadly Dispute. I haven't studied the bonus sheet. This is just what I saw in my drafts and what my opponents cast. And, multiple times, an important spell got hit by a counterspell. Oh, a Brainstorm was cast against me. That seems lower impact here than it would be in a lot of places, since there's not a ton of shuffling. But yeah, I mean, if it is generally the case that the bonus sheet is basically just providing more efficient interaction and removal, then the impact is just the set has a little bit more efficient interaction and removal than it looks like. But as good a card as Counterspell or Fatal Push is, Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's another card that I had. Also super efficient interaction. Those are some of the, best cards. Those are, constructed all-stars, but they're not limited bombs, right? The thing that they give you is a good rate on exchanging resources with good flexibility. That's not gonna run away with a game of limited the way that just any must answer creature will. So I don't think that they're terribly warping. They're strong cards that you want to take highly, but they don't, break the game. So I don't know. It's kind of cool. You get to be excited about having this good card, good rate, happy about the pick, but the experience playing against it might be oh, I my spell got countered. That sucked. But it's not going to be yeah, my deck just couldn't beat a counter spell. That's just not really how limited works. Do the sagas make 1/1s and 0/1s better? Because you can chump block part of the saga. Look, chump blocking, the ceiling on chump blocking is pretty low, right? Am I excited that I now have the ability to prevent 4 damage by blocking with an 0/1? No, not really. I could do that regardless. My opponent's going to attack me with a creature, whether it's a saga or not a saga. And, the value proposition on an 0/1 is that you can trade it in to block 4 damage at some point. I don't think the sagas really super meaningfully change the output that you're getting from the small creatures. Next question. Can you share your thoughts on VV and CDH? This is not the place for that, but I do want to note that, yes, I will be sharing my thoughts on CDH in much larger quantity in the future. That is something that I will try to remember to comment on. But also, as long as I've brought it up, I might as well say, I think the card is fine. I think it's overrated. I don't think it's going to be a very good commander. I think it's good in existing blue-red storm decks, but not as big a deal as people have made it out to be. My throat is kind of falling apart, so that's going to be it for me. Maybe forever, maybe not, but I will not be back next week at my usual time, or most likely at any time. Follow on Twitter or Discord for updates about what will be coming next for Drafting Archetypes. I remain hopeful that it is something rather than nothing, but we will see. So, again, thank you everyone for the last close to 5 years of supports. It's meant a lot to me, and I'll still be around. Bye for now.
Prepare for light speed.